everybody, Ellie here for WhoCulture, and the time has finally come. It feels like we've been waiting for this for a really long time, and I guess we kind of have, basically since the beginning of the Disney deal, but the spin-off, The War Between the Land and the Sea, the Unit Sea Devil spin-off from Doctor Who, has finally arrived, and we are going to be going through every episode of the 5 episodes and give our ups and downs as we usually do. But before we continue, I do want to tell you about an incredible offer that we have from our partners at Proton VPN. Picture the scene, if you will. A spin-off of an incredibly popular sci-fi franchise has just launched, but for some reason it's only available in the UK at first and not the rest of the world. So that totally made up scenario sounds pretty annoying for everyone not in the land of scones and Yorkshire puddings, right? But with a VPN like Proton, you can unlock your location exclusive content wherever you are in the world. So even if you're out of the UK on holiday, for example, you can still access BBC iPlayer and all your other content and services as though you were still at home. Proton VPN also keeps you safe online by protecting you from cyber threats and malware, and it also comes with a built-in ad blocker that prevents advertisers from using your browsing history to gather your personal data. Click the link down below or scan the QR code to get up to 75% off Proton VPN and unlock Doctor Who from anywhere in the world. Thank you to Proton VPN for sponsoring this video, and now let's get into the ups and downs for episode 1 of The War Between the Land and the Sea, Homo Aqua. Okay, let's get straight into this, shall we, and start with an up. Lorne Balfe's music. Now, I'll be honest, at first I was a little sad about the absence of Murray Gold. We all know how I feel about Murray Gold's music, and I was a little bit disappointed that he wouldn't be coming over to this other project in the Whoniverse. However, right from the beginning, Lorne Balfe just delivered some absolutely fantastic music. Now, I am a fan of his anyway, from other projects too, so I did know that he was going to deliver some great music, but my goodness, it's so great, especially in the first kind of 10 minutes of this episode when we see Barclay and the rest of the unit team heading across the cliff tops towards the village. It's very cinematic. It gives a very cinematic vibe to this show, and I think that really complements the more serious, more grounded vibes of this show compared to Doctor Who itself. So I am very, very excited to hear more music from Lorne Balfe in this series moving forwards, because I really think it does elevate the show to something very grand and very grounded. So we open the episode, near enough open the episode, with the introduction of Barclay. And again, I'm going to come straight in here with another up for Russell Tovey's performance. He plays the everyman role really, really, really well. And he really sells this idea of being a fish out of water, if you pardon the pun, in this situation that he finds himself in. And I really feel the anxiety and the panic that he feels as he gets deeper and deeper into this secret mission, this secret military, if you like, mission that he has no right really to be in. And you really feel that in his character, especially in episode 1. He feels way out of his depth. Now, I think there's a bit of mixed feelings about some of his line delivery, especially towards the end of the episode, where there's maybe a slight comedic tone or level to the way he's delivered some lines, especially when he comes to the me at the end, and again when he answers the okay. For me personally, I did not have an issue with this. In fact, I think it actually brought something extra to the character. I can see why some people, for example, our channel manager Danny, didn't like this vibe to his character. For me, I feel like it is that kind of... Humour is one of the most common ways to mask fear. And although I don't think he was, as a character, saying these lines to be funny, I do think it gives an air of this is the kind of character who might use humour to mask fear, and this delivery kind of shows that slightly. And also, who knows how you're going to react in a situation like this? He really doesn't know what he's doing. He's there by accident, which he keeps reminding us throughout the episode. So I actually don't think it's that unbelievable for him to have a crack in his voice when he delivers this very important response to this very important ambassador in this room full of very important people. he didn't expect to be spoken to in this room. So I didn't take any issue with the delivery of those lines at the end there. It made me laugh. And I watched the episodes with my family, who are just more of a casual viewer than I am. And those are the moments that made them laugh and had them the most engaged as well. So I think sometimes maybe from a die-hard fan perspective, you might look at it and go, this feels out of touch, or kind of kills the tone of what we're watching, because we are wanting it to be this, this, and this. But I think if you remember that this is also designed not just for the die-hard fans, but also the casual viewer. For the casual viewer, those moments that have a little bit of humour to them are important, because they also bring that side that's not all about the lore, but also something that's draws a connection between them and the characters as well. So for me, I think Russell Tovey was the standout performance, at least of episode 1, for sure. So the gist of the story to this point, because I feel like we've kind of jumped quite quickly from the opening. A sea devil, or Homo Aqua as we later call them, has been caught by some fishermen and killed, and units have basically arrived to come and tidy everything up, clear up the mess. And again, I'm coming in with another up. We're starting strong here. I really, really, really love the redesign of the Sea Devils. When they first announced that they were going to be creating a spin-off centered around the Sea Devils, but with a much more serious tone, I was very skeptical and unsure about how successful that would be with the old design of the Sea Devils. Now, I know they had a slight upgrade when we got to Legend of the Sea Devils from the original Sea Devils, but they were very, very similar from the original to the Jodie Whittaker episode. And either way, they kind of had a kind of dopey look to them. They didn't look like the kind of creatures that could lead a series as the main antagonist, which I don't necessarily think they are. This is a show that's very much who is really the bad guy. But in general, they didn't give off a vibe of a creature that could lead a show and be taken that seriously. But then the redesign comes in, and I think they look fantastic because they don't shy too far away from that original design, but they've been adapted in a way that makes them look that much more realistic and animalistic and less like a big Disney World costume with a headpiece, you know? So I think they've done a really, really good job of switching that design up or adapting that design so it doesn't come too far away from what they should look like, but also making them look much more realistic so they fit within this more grounded, mature, serious story. And I also like that they look both cute and scary at the same time, and I think that really, really works here because Homo Aqua are not designed to be, they're not presented to be these intimidating monsters. They're not hostile aliens who have come to take over the Earth. They're not designed to be these intimidating monsters. They live on the Earth. They're from the Earth too. But if they are provoked, they can be very intimidating. So I think the balance in that design works really well, that they have an innocence to them, but they also have an intimidation to them, as we see in that very first shot or first scene of the episode when the fishermen catch it and it screeches at them. That's really terrifying to look at. But just at face value, they also can look very innocent. So I think the design is done really, really well. And I don't look at them at any point and go, that looks really goofy, like I did with the original design. So I'm going to jump forward just a little bit to the first meeting between the Homo Aqua and the humans, with the big translation device being used. Now, there's actually been a little bit of a disagreement in amongst our team about this scene in particular and the use of the translation device. I thought it was actually a very clever way to have communication made between the humans and the Sea Devils, or Homo Aqua. With UNIT now being this major established organisation, this huge organisation with a giant tower in the middle of London, it screams to me that there are teams of people whose literal job it is to sit in a workshop or in an office or whatever and brainstorm and work on scientific and technological ways to communicate with alien life forms in the event that we need to. Also, let's not forget that UNIT have always been aware, or up until this point, are aware of the Sea Devils and the backstory of the Sea Devils. So they must know that at some point communication may need to be made with them. So backup plans and contingencies have been put in place for this very event. So it doesn't scream as unusual to me that they have been working on some sort of way to communicate with these creatures in the event that is necessary. That to me screams this is what UNIT's purpose is, especially if they're now this big established organisation as opposed to the Torchwood team, which was a bunch of 4 or 5 people in an underground secret base. I also prefer that they went down the route of having a translation device as opposed to the Sea Devils walking out of the ocean and speaking English straight away. You know, this isn't Star Trek where they have their portable universal translators, which easily explains why every creature we come across in the entire galaxy speaks English. For Danny, on the other hand, he felt that it was too zany, too magic sci-fi for this show that was sold as a more serious and grounded story within the Whoniverse. I do get that, but I also think for as much as we wanted this to be more serious, more grounded, more mature than Doctor Who itself, I don't think we should forget that it is still part of the Whoniverse. So there has still got to be elements of that zaniness, maybe toned down a lot, but there's still got to be some elements of that in there because it is still part of the Doctor Who world. And so there is still going to be use of technologies and things that aid the story along and are science fiction, if you like. So what do you think? Yay or nay to the translation device? Now, one thing we are in agreement with regards to this scene, though, and something that does deserve an up, is Colin McFarlane's performance. He just brings such a strong presence, especially in episode 1. Obviously, we'll get to episode 2, but in this episode, he's leading that task force and leading that first part that then leads on to the more kind of politicians and officials and all of that stuff. But in this moment, he's on the ground, he's hands-on, he's leading that mission, and he does an incredible job. And he actually delivers probably my favourite line in this episode, which is in response to Barclay being there by mistake and basically telling him, I shouldn't be here, I'm not supposed to be here, I'm here by accident. And he says, and that, I suspect, is how history is made. One big chain of mistakes. And I loved that line. I remember the first time I watched the episode because, little secret, I've watched it quite a few times to get this to you. I think I wrote that line down. I said, oh, I love that line. So, yay for him. So then we jump to something that I love to see the return of, which is the news montages, the video clips of different news stations from across the world all coming together. I love that. Also, we have Trinity Wells back. Love her. That to me feels like RTD1 era Whoniverse. We used to get that all the time in Russell T Davies's first era of the show. So I'm really glad that we have the return of that. And also, they're a really clever way of delivering exposition to the audience without it feeling really obvious or out of place. Like, if you're going to have to kind of progress the story along and tell the audience what's happening in a creative way, do it through news reports that are designed to inform the characters of the story and the audience at the same time, rather than two people who should both be in the know, or two characters who should both be in the know within the context of the story, telling each other what's happening in this really janky way that doesn't fit because the audience needs to also know what's happening. So the newsreels actually a really, really clever plot device to give exposition to the audience. I also really like the look of how they've kind of smashed down the walls to fit the tank in. There's something kind of poetic about destroying this building for progression, destroying this old building to facilitate progression in the world. I thought it looked really good. However, I do now come to a down for this episode when we get to these few scenes when we're preparing for the arrival of Homo Aqua. And it revolves mostly around the characters in Kate and Shirley and all of those group of unit characters in that whatever room they're in. I assume they're still in Imperial House, but in their own little room. I feel like the balance in tone isn't quite right in especially this part of the episode. I love the more serious and intense tone of the show overall, but then there are moments that kind of feel out of place within the episodes, definitely in this episode, especially regarding those unit characters, where there's either kind of clunky exposition or kind of funny quips that don't feel right coming either from the characters that are saying them or in the moment that they're being said. So let's start with the exposition. Obviously, I just commented on the newsreels being a really good way to inform the audience of what's happening without being too on the nose and obvious. But then you have moments where, like when the Homo Aqua or the Aqua kind are arriving through the tunnel, and we've got lines such as, looks like we have 6 life forms, followed by, there are 3 separate life forms in total. But we know that because you've shown us those 6 dots on the screen a gazillion times. We've seen that shot. We can decipher for ourselves that there are multiple life forms because we can see them on the screen. You jump to that shot a gazillion times. We know. So it just felt a little bit like there was unnecessary exposition. And it then made me think of that rumour, which I don't really think is a rumour at this point. I think there is a lot of truth to it, that television now is kind of created acknowledging the fact that most people are looking at their phone while watching the television. And so lines are written to basically tell the audience what's happening because they know that you're not actually watching it. So rather than being engaged and seeing that there's dots on the screen and going, there's 6 life forms and look, there's 3 different colours, so I'm going to assume there's 3 different life forms, they have to explicitly say that out loud because they know that 50% of you are not looking at the screen right now. So they have to tell you so you take that information in. It's very sad that that's how television has to be made now. But that is a moment that screams that they were thinking about that when they were writing this scene. So then for the other part of this down, which was the quips. Unlike Barclay, where I didn't find that an issue, and I didn't really think it was a quip, it was just the way in which his lines were delivered, I liked that. However, and for his character, I think that worked. However, there are some characters where I feel like the quips felt unnecessary considering their position and the situation we were in. For example, Shirley making a joke about the ambassador's lobster dinner. Maybe time and a place, and I know that Kate does pick her up on that, but again, Shirley is like senior staff in the most important room, keeping obs on everything. Time and a place, that didn't feel quite right. Then later on, again, very serious moment where Salt has chosen Barclay to be the ambassador, and Kate decides that there's a good point to make a joke. What are they, Christians now? And it's not even necessarily that the lines themselves or the jokes themselves, it's maybe who's saying them. In those moments, it didn't feel like the right thing, the right or appropriate time to be saying those things, and these are the characters who should know that. So for me, it just felt like the tone wasn't quite right in some moments, but it's not a major thing. I know that I've spoken about it for quite some time now and it seems like a major thing, but quite honestly, I just think it's something that's just slightly off balance. It didn't take me out of the story necessarily, but it was just a little bit off balance, considering this is supposed to be a more serious, mature show. But anyway, let's move on from that and let's take ourselves to another up. Because the imagery, the visuals of that giant water tank inside Imperial House, absolutely stunning. So good. Now, I will be honest, at first, I did think to myself, why have they bothered building this giant water tank to facilitate Aqua kind when not 5 scenes earlier, we saw the Sea Devils standing, walking out of the water. So they can breathe out of water, they can walk on land. So why have you built this giant tank when they could have just walked out of the river into the building across the road? Why do we go through all of these theatrics? But symbolically, it works really, really well because essentially it puts the Sea Devils, Homo Aqua, Aqua kind, whatever you want to call them, it essentially puts them in this giant aquarium, right? In this room full of humans that are then looking at them behind glass in water like they're in an aquarium. And this is a perfect representation of how they feel they've been treated by humanity. Secondary, inferior, just like animals who live in the sea. You know, they're not being treated like equals as they should be. And seeing them in that tank behind the glass represents that so well. Also, does everybody else anticipate that giant tank cracking at some point and flooding that room with water? Because it's gonna happen, right? Surely it's gonna happen. But while we're on the topic of the giant tank and Aqua kind, I do now come to a down, which is the giant CGI fish. Not the Sea Devils, not Salt, specifically big fish. Big CGI fish thing that brings absolutely nothing to the story whatsoever and looks ridiculous. Yeah, those. Why? Now, I know I just commented earlier about myself and Danny disagreeing on the zaniness of the translation device. This one I'm on board with. This one I feel that in Doctor Who, the hokiness of these creatures would probably work. But in a show that's trying to be more serious and more grounded, and to be taken more seriously, why did anyone think that was a good idea? And if they brought something to the story, which, you know, I will eat my words if in episode 4 they become very relevant, but at this point in time, they don't bring anything to the story and they take me out of that more serious tone, that grounded tone. Especially after I spoke about the redesign of the Sea Devils to look more realistic. They work really, really well. Not so much the big fish. Having said that, we do then get introduced to Salt. Salt gets an up. Gugu Mbatha-Raw absolutely nails this role. She is so compelling in this role. You know, there's a slight naivety that she brings because obviously, despite the fact that she has more of a human form than the other Sea Devils, Homo Aqua, she is still alien to humanity. So she's got to have some similarities, but also doesn't know anything about this world. And I think she plays that really, really well. It's important that she doesn't appear too human, but also she's very strong. She doesn't mess around. And, you know, as soon as she's out of that tank, she's in control of the room. You know, we spoke about the tank feeling like an aquarium and the Homo Aqua feeling secondary. But as soon as that barrier is removed, there's no question of who is in control the moment Salt steps out into that room. Also, credit has to go to Gugu Mbatha-Raw because it must be incredibly difficult to act so well and convincingly under all of that makeup, which, by the way, looks amazing. That is awards-worthy makeup. So credit to the makeup department for that because she looks fantastic. And again, she doesn't look too human, but she also looks considerably different to the rest of the Aqua kind. And I really love the way that the fins on her head kind of move involuntarily. I'm trying to find my words. Yeah, I like that the fins on her head move almost involuntarily in this kind of like animalistic way. You know how like a dog's tail kind of moves without them even being able to control it, or their ears, for example. So I really like that kind of animalistic style going on there as well. So really great design, both for the redesign of the Sea Devils and for Salt specifically as well. Now, obviously, this is a Doctor Who spin-off. We know that this is a Doctor Who spin-off, but there wasn't really any mention of Doctor Who in any of the marketing for this. Almost like they were trying to deliberately sell it as a standalone thing, unrelated to Doctor Who. So my question then is, was it odd then that they then mentioned the Doctor in the episode? So for me personally, I don't think it was strange because for as much as they might not have referenced Doctor Who much in the marketing, that doesn't mean it isn't a Doctor Who spin-off. It's always been designed to be that, and whether the marketing addressed that or not, that doesn't change the fact that it is a spin-off. So it doesn't seem odd to me that they would mention the Doctor. It exists all within the same world, and the Doctor is such an important element, especially to UNIT. So for me, I don't think it was necessarily odd to have reference to the Doctor. When we get to episode 2, I have more thoughts on that, but you'll have to come back for the ups and downs of episode 2 to hear my thoughts on that. On the other side of that though, because it was marketed in a way that didn't really relate it to Doctor Who in any way, there may well have been viewers who aren't Doctor Who fans who just wanted to watch this show for what it was. Now for those viewers, I can understand why these lines referencing the Doctor might have been a little bit confusing, but I also feel like they're not that deep, doesn't take anything away from the story, doesn't ruin anything, and if anything, it might actually compel people who aren't Doctor Who fans who have watched this to then go, oh wait, this is a Doctor Who thing? Maybe I should check Doctor Who out again. Or maybe I should check out Doctor Who for the first time. So yes, it might have been a little bit confusing to those who were watching who weren't Doctor Who fans, but I don't think it takes anything away from the episode, at least in this first episode. And yeah, might actually compel someone to go and check Doctor Who out. But I would be interested to know if you watched these episodes of The War Between the Land and the Sea as a diehard Whovian who was going to watch everything in the Whoniverse, or if you watched this as a first-time viewer of the Whoniverse and The War Between the Land and the Sea was your first foray into the world of Doctor Who. Those are the people I'm very interested to hear their thoughts on this. If there are any, I don't know. If you, did only Doctor Who fans watch this, or maybe some non-Whovians did too? Let me know in the comments down below if you watched this as your first foray into the Whoniverse. So my overall thoughts really is, I think it was a solid episode. It was really, really, really strong. I didn't have any major downs for it coming out of it initially, but I also wasn't blown away initially either. So it was kind of difficult when I came to writing the ups and downs because I didn't want it to look like I thought it was the most amazing thing I'd ever seen, but the balance of ups and downs kind of made it look that way. But I also didn't think it was awful either. Solid, as I say, but there is certainly room for improvement. I do really like the shift in tone into a more serious and grounded show compared to Doctor Who itself. I like that we're starting to actually see some more character development, or at least we are for the character of Barclay, so far at least, compared to some of the characters in the main show as well. But as I say, there is room for improvement. It has definitely gripped me though, and I'm glad that episode 2 was airing straight after episode 1, so I didn't have to wait to see what happened. But yeah, overall, I do think it was very solid and probably the best thing we've had in the Whoniverse for quite some time. So very much enjoyed, very much looking forward to getting to the next episodes. And of course, episode 2, we will be doing the ups and downs for as well. So this video will be out today, and tomorrow you'll have the ups and downs for episode 2. Let me know your thoughts on episode 1 in the comments down below. Please try and keep your episode 2 ones for episode 2 video so we don't spoil anything for anybody. And I will see you in tomorrow's video. In the meantime, I've been Ellie for WhoCulture, and in the words of River Song herself, goodbye, sweeties.